Some people do not become less beautiful with time. They become harder to ignore, not because their face remains perfect, not because life never touched them, not because they escaped pain, disappointment, heartbreak, or loss, but because something inside them becomes deeper, calmer, sharper, more honest, more difficult to replace. And that kind of attraction does not fade the way surface beauty fades. It grows, quietly, slowly, powerfully. There's a kind of person who becomes more magnetic with age, not because they try harder to be desired, but because they stop begging to be seen. They stop performing. They stop chasing attention. They stop shaping themselves around everyone's approval. They stop trying to look interesting and begin becoming real. And reality has a strange beauty, a beauty that cannot be copied, a beauty that does not come from youth, perfection, or being easy to like. It comes from someone who has lived enough to know who they are, someone who has lost enough to stop clinging to what is false, someone who has been hurt enough to recognize what is real, someone who has been disappointed enough to stop worshiping illusions, someone who has survived enough to carry peace like power. That is why rare people become more attractive with age. They are not becoming louder. They are becoming truer. They are not becoming desperate to be noticed. They are becoming impossible to fake. And in a world full of performance, truth becomes magnetic. You can feel it when they enter a room. They do not need to dominate. They do not need to prove. They do not need to be the most beautiful, the loudest, the most charming, or the most visible. Their presence is quieter than that, but stronger, because they are not begging the room to accept them. They have already accepted themselves in ways most people are still avoiding. And that changes everything. The way they speak, the way they listen, the way they move, the way they say no, the way they stay silent when silence is more powerful than explanation, the way they no longer rush to be understood by people who do not know how to listen. There is something deeply attractive about a person who no longer abandons themselves to be chosen. Because youth often chases. Youth often performs. Youth often asks, do they like me? Am I enough? Do I look good enough? Did I say the right thing? Will they leave if I become too honest? But rare people, with age, begin asking different questions. Do I like who I become around them? Is this connection peaceful or draining? Does this room require me to shrink? Is this attention worth my peace? Does this person meet my truth or only my mask? And those questions make them powerful. Because the more they know themselves, the less they can be easily controlled. They are not easily impressed, not because they are cold, but because they have seen enough false beauty to recognize emptiness behind charm. They have seen enough pretty words to know when actions do not match. They have seen enough emotional games to stop mistaking confusion for depth. They have seen enough temporary attention to stop treating it like love. And that discernment makes them attractive, not to everyone, but to the right people. Because rare people do not become attractive to the crowd. They become attractive to those who can recognize depth. And depth is not always noticed by shallow eyes. Some people will miss it. They will look only for youth, for noise, for quick excitement, for perfect surfaces, for people who are easy to consume and easy to forget. But those who have lived, those who have suffered, those who have grown beyond appearances can see the difference. They can see the beauty of someone who carries themselves with quiet certainty. Someone who does not need constant validation. Someone whose energy is not scattered everywhere. Someone who has boundaries without cruelty. Softness without weakness. Mystery without manipulation. Confidence without arrogance. And that combination is rare, because most people either become hardened by life or desperate because of it. They either close their heart completely, or they keep begging the world to repair what broke inside them. But rare people do something different. They allow pain to refine them. They let life teach them without letting it make them bitter. They become wiser, but not cruel. Softer, but not naive. More selective, but not empty. More peaceful, but not passive. They learn that being attractive is not about being desired by everyone. It is about becoming deeply aligned with yourself. And alignment has a glow. A person who is aligned does not need to force charm. They do not need to impress. They do not need to compete with every face in the room. They are not trying to become the fantasy of someone else. They are becoming the truth of themselves. And that truth begins to show. It shows in their eyes, not because their eyes are untouched by pain, but because their eyes no longer run from reality. They have seen loss. They have seen betrayal. They have seen endings they did not choose. They have seen versions of themselves disappear. They have seen people leave. They have seen dreams collapse. But somehow, they are still here, still standing, still feeling, still growing, still capable of beauty. That kind of survival creates a different presence, a presence that cannot be bought, cannot be filtered, cannot be performed, cannot be created by pretending. It is earned. Earned through every moment they chose not to become cruel after being hurt. Earned through every time they rebuilt themselves quietly. Earned through every season where they had to let go of people, dreams, identities, and illusions. Earned through every moment they chose truth over comfort. And that is why their attraction feels different. It is not the attraction of someone trying to seduce. It is the attraction of someone who has become whole enough not to chase. They do not pull people in by performing mystery. They simply have depth. And depth naturally creates curiosity. People wonder why they seem so calm, why they no longer react to everything, why they do not explain themselves to everyone, why they can walk away without making a scene, why they can love deeply and still protect their peace, why they seem kind but not easy to manipulate, why they seem warm but not available to everyone. That is rare attraction. It is the attraction of self-respect, the attraction of emotional maturity, the attraction of someone who knows the difference between being wanted and being valued. Because as rare people age, they stop needing to be wanted by everyone. They begin wanting to be valued by the right ones. And that shift changes their energy. They no longer give themselves away to prove they are lovable. They no longer explain their worth to people who can only recognize it when it benefits them. They no longer chase people who are comfortable losing them. They no longer compete for attention that feels cheap. They no longer confuse being seen with being understood. And the less they chase, the more magnetic they become. Because nothing is more attractive than a person who is not begging for attraction. Nothing is more powerful than someone who can stand in their own presence without needing the world to applaud. Nothing is more unforgettable than someone who has stopped performing and started existing honestly. But this kind of beauty often appears after pain, because pain removes illusions. Pain teaches you what is temporary. Pain shows you who stays and who only enjoyed access to your light. Pain forces you to ask what really matters. And if you listen, pain can make you deeper. It can make you more honest. It can make you more present. It can make you less impressed by shallow things. It can make you less afraid of silence. It can make you less desperate to be chosen by people who do not know how to love properly. But only if you do not let pain make you bitter. That is the difference. Many people age, but they do not deepen. They only harden. They become more suspicious, more resentful, more reactive, more controlled by what hurt them. They carry every wound like proof that life is unsafe and love is foolish. And that kind of energy ages the soul. But rare people do not let pain become their entire personality. They let pain become wisdom. They let disappointment become discernment. They let heartbreak become self-respect. They let loneliness become self-knowledge. They let betrayal become clarity. They let time strip away everything false until only what is real remains. And what remains is beautiful. Not childish beauty. Not attention-seeking beauty. Not beauty that needs to be constantly confirmed. But grown beauty. A beauty with silence in it. A beauty with grief in it. A beauty with strength in it. A beauty that says, I've been through things, but I didn't abandon myself. That is why rare people become more attractive with age, because they become less divided, less dependent on outside approval, less willing to betray themselves, less afraid of being misunderstood, less interested in pleasing people who are committed to seeing them wrongly. They become more themselves. And becoming yourself is the deepest form of beauty. Because the most unattractive thing is not age. It is emptiness. It is bitterness. It is pretending. It is desperation. It is needing everyone to validate you because you have not learned how to stand with yourself. But a person who has learned to stand with themselves carries a different atmosphere. They do not need constant noise. They do not need attention to feel alive. They do not need to be desired to feel worthy. They do not need to be chosen by everyone to know they are valuable. And that calmness makes people curious, because most people are still performing, still chasing, still proving, still trying to become what others will applaud. But rare people age into something quieter and stronger. They become selective with their energy, intentional with their words, careful with their access, honest with their emotions, protective of their peace. They know that not every person deserves the same closeness. Not every opinion deserves the same attention. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every attraction deserves a response. Not every connection deserves entry into their inner world. And this selectiveness does not make them cold. It makes them valuable, because what is available to everyone rarely feels sacred. And rare people understand that their energy is sacred. Their time is sacred. Their softness is sacred. Their presence is sacred. Their love is sacred. So they stop handing it to people who only want to consume it. They stop giving their best parts to people who do not know how to hold them. They stop allowing temporary attention to access permanent places in their life. And when a person becomes that careful with themselves, their energy changes. They are no longer scattered, no longer leaking themselves into every room, no longer trying to be everything for everyone. They become concentrated, grounded, harder to access, but more powerful to experience. And that makes them more attractive. Because attraction is not only about what people see, it is about what they feel in your presence. Do they feel chaos? Do they feel neediness? Do they feel performance? Do they feel emptiness behind the beauty? Or do they feel depth, peace, strength, warmth, a life lived honestly? Rare people become more attractive with age because their presence begins to carry a story. Not a story they have to explain, a story you can feel. You feel that they have survived. You feel that they have learned. You feel that they have stopped chasing what is not meant for them. You feel that they no longer give access easily. You feel that their softness has been protected by wisdom. And that combination pulls people in, because the world is full of people who look good but feel empty. People who know how to attract attention, but not how to create safety. People who know how to perform confidence, but not how to carry truth. People who know how to be desired, but not how to be deeply known. Rare people become different. They are not only attractive, they are memorable. And being memorable is deeper than being noticed. Anyone can be noticed for a moment. But not everyone stays in the mind. Not everyone leaves an atmosphere behind. Not everyone makes people feel that they were in the presence of something real. That kind of beauty does not fade quickly, because it is not built only on appearance. It is built on character, on emotional depth, on restraint, on self-respect, on the quiet power of someone who has stopped abandoning themselves. And with age, this becomes stronger, because life removes the unnecessary. The fake friendships, the shallow desires, the desperate need to be chosen, the fear of disappointing everyone, the belief that being liked by many is better than being understood by few. And slowly, rare people begin living with less noise and more truth. They may have fewer people around them, but deeper peace. Fewer conversations, but more honesty. Fewer attachments, but more freedom. Fewer performances, but more presence. And that presence becomes the attraction. The attraction of someone who no longer needs to be everywhere. The attraction of someone who no longer needs to convince. The attraction of someone who no longer needs to be young, perfect, or constantly admired to feel worthy. Because they know something that younger, more insecure versions of themselves did not know. They know that attention is not the same as love. They know that desire is not the same as respect. They know that being chased is not the same as being valued. They know that being seen is not the same as being understood. They know that being wanted by many can still feel lonely if no one truly meets you. And this knowledge changes what they allow. It changes how they love, how they speak, how they leave, how they choose, how they protect themselves, how they carry silence. Rare people become more attractive with age because they stop trying to be chosen by the wrong people. They begin choosing themselves first. And a person who chooses themselves without arrogance becomes magnetic, because they are no longer moving from hunger. They are moving from wholeness. They are not asking, "Please see me." They are saying, "I see myself." They are not asking, "Please choose me." They are saying, "I will not abandon myself to be chosen." They are not asking, "Am I enough?" They are living like they finally know the answer. And that is a beauty no mirror can create, a beauty no compliment can give, a beauty no rejection can take away. It is the beauty of someone who has become rooted. And rooted people are rare, because most people are still being blown around by opinion, by trends, by comparison, by fear, by attention, by the need to be validated. But rare people become like old trees, not untouched by storms, but strengthened by surviving them. They do not need to prove they are alive. Their presence proves it. They do not need to show every wound. Their wisdom carries it. They do not need to explain every boundary. Their peace speaks for them. And that is why, as they age, their beauty becomes less obvious, but more powerful. Less loud, but more lasting. Less desperate, but more magnetic. Less available, but more unforgettable. They become the kind of person you do not only look at, you feel them. You remember them. You wonder about them, because they carry something most people lose while chasing approval. They carry themselves. And that is why they become more attractive with age. Because the older they get, the less they need to prove. They no longer chase rooms that do not see them. They no longer beg people to recognize their worth. They no longer perform beauty for people who only know how to consume it. They no longer confuse attention with love. They no longer confuse being wanted with being valued. They no longer confuse being admired with being understood. And this makes them different. It gives them a presence that cannot be forced, a calm that cannot be copied, a confidence that does not need to announce itself. They become beautiful in a way that makes people feel something deeper than attraction. People feel peace around them. They feel curiosity. They feel respect. They feel the weight of someone who has lived, lost, learned, and still did not become bitter. That is rare, because time does not make everyone deeper. Time only reveals what people have done with their pain. Some people become harder. Some become colder. Some become more desperate to be young, desired, and seen. But rare people become more real. They let time remove what was false. They let pain teach them without turning their heart into stone. They let loss make them wiser. They let disappointment make them more selective. They let solitude make them more whole. And slowly, their attraction becomes less about how they look and more about how they feel. Their energy changes. Their silence changes. Their eyes change. Their standards change. They no longer need to be chosen by everyone because they finally know how to choose themselves. And a person who chooses themselves without cruelty becomes unforgettable. Because they are not trying to impress you. They are not trying to convince you. They are not trying to become whatever you want them to be. They are simply standing in the truth of who they are. And that truth is magnetic. It is why some people become more beautiful after heartbreak, more interesting after loss, more peaceful after disappointment, more powerful after they stop chasing. Because every painful season stripped away something false. The need to please, the fear of being misunderstood, the hunger for cheap attention, the addiction to approval, the desire to be liked by people who could never truly see them. And what remained was presence. A person who has presence does not need to compete. They do not need to be the loudest. They do not need to be the youngest. They do not need to be the most perfect. They do not need to be constantly desired to know they are valuable. They simply exist with a quiet kind of power. And that power grows with age. Because age gives them something beauty alone cannot give. Depth, discernment, emotional control, self-respect, a history of surviving things they never speak about. And when someone carries all of that with grace, they become rare. They become the kind of person people remember without fully understanding why. The kind of person whose silence feels stronger than someone else's performance. The kind of person whose calm feels more attractive than someone else's chaos. The kind of person whose eyes say, "I have been through things, but I am still here." And that is why rare people become more attractive with age. Not because life made them untouched, but because life touched them deeply, and they still chose to remain alive inside. They still chose softness. They still chose truth. They still chose growth. They still chose dignity. They still chose not to become a copy of what hurt them. And that is a beauty most people do not understand until they mature enough to recognize it. Because immature eyes look for perfection, but mature eyes look for presence. Immature eyes chase excitement, but mature eyes recognize peace. Immature eyes want what shines loudly, but mature eyes notice what glows quietly. And rare people glow quietly. They don't need to shout. They don't need to prove. They don't need to beg the world to see them. Their life becomes the proof. Their peace becomes the beauty. Their self-respect becomes the attraction. Their truth becomes the thing no one can replace. So if you are becoming quieter with age, don't think you are becoming less interesting. You may be becoming more real. If you are becoming more selective, don't think you are becoming cold. You may be learning the value of your own energy. If you no longer want everyone's attention, do not think your light is fading. You may finally be done giving it to people who never knew how to honor it. And if fewer people can reach you now, that does not mean you are less lovable. It may mean your love has become more sacred, more protected, more honest, more expensive to access. Because rare people do not become attractive by trying to belong everywhere. They become attractive by belonging deeply to themselves. And when a person belongs to themselves, they carry something that age cannot take away. A beauty that does not panic, a confidence that does not beg, a softness that does not collapse, a silence that does not feel empty, a presence that does not need permission. That is the kind of beauty time cannot destroy. Because it was not built on being young, it was built on becoming whole. And the more whole you become, the more unforgettable you are. Not to everyone, but to the people who can recognize depth, to the people who are no longer fooled by surfaces, to the people who understand that the rarest attraction is not the one that burns fast. It is the one that stays, the one that deepens, the one that grows quieter, stronger, and more impossible to replace with time. Because rare people do not fade with age. They become clearer, they become calmer, they become more themselves. And nothing is more attractive than someone who has finally stopped running away from who they are.